Section 34 of L'Assommoir. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Martin Geeson. L'Assommoir by Emile Zola. Translated by Ernest A. Visitelli. Chapter VIII. On the following Saturday, Coupeau, who had not come home to dinner, brought Lantier with him towards 10 o'clock. They had had some sheep's trotters at Chez Thomas at Montmartre. "You mustn't scold, wife," said the zinc worker. "We're sober, as you can see. Oh, there's no fear with him. He keeps one on the straight road." And he related how they had happened to meet in the Rue Rochechouart. After dinner, Lantier had declined to have a drink at the Black Ball, saying that when one was married to a pretty and worthy little woman, one ought not to go liquoring up at all the wine shops. Gervaise smiled slightly as she listened. Oh, she was not thinking of scolding. She felt too much embarrassed for that. She had been expecting to see her former lover again some day, ever since their dinner party, but at such an hour, when she was about to go to bed, the unexpected arrival of the two men had startled her. Her hands were quivering as she pinned back the hair which had slid down her neck. "You know," resumed Coupeau, "as he was so polite as to decline a drink outside, you must treat us to one here. Ah, he certainly owe us that." The workwomen had left long ago. Mother Coupeau and Nana had just gone to bed. Gervaise, who had been just about to put up the shutters when they appeared, left the shop open and brought some glasses, which she placed on a corner of the work table, with what was left of a bottle of brandy. Lantier remained standing and avoided speaking directly to her. However, when she served him, he exclaimed, "Only a thimbleful, madame, if you please." Coupeau looked at them and then spoke his mind very plainly. They were not going to behave like a couple of geese, he hoped. The past was past, was it not? If people nursed grudges for 9 and 10 years together, one would end by no longer seeing anybody. No, he carried his heart in his hand, he did. First of all, he knew who he had to deal with, a worthy woman and a worthy man. In short, two friends. He felt easy. He knew he could depend upon them. "Oh, that's certain, quite certain," repeated Gervaise, looking on the ground and scarcely understanding what she said. "She is a sister now, nothing but a sister," murmured Lantier in his turn. "Mon Dieu, shake hands," cried Coupeau, "and let those who don't like it go to blazes. When one has proper feelings, one is better off than millionaires. For myself, I prefer friendship before everything, because friendship is friendship, and there's nothing to beat it." He dealt himself heavy blows on the chest, and seemed so moved that they had to calm him. They all three silently clinked glasses and drank their drop of brandy. Gervaise was then able to look at Lantier at her ease, for on the night of her saint's day she had only seen him through a fog. He had grown more stout, his arms and legs seeming too heavy because of his small stature. His face was still handsome, even though it was a little puffy now due to his life of idleness. He still took great pains with his narrow moustache. He looked about his actual age. He was wearing grey trousers, a heavy blue overcoat and a round hat. He even had a watch with a silver chain, on which a ring was hanging as a keepsake. He looked quite like a gentleman. "I'm off," said he. "I live no end of a distance from here." He was already on the pavement when the zinc worker called him back to make him promise never to pass the door without looking in to wish them good day. Meanwhile, Gervaise, who had quietly disappeared, returned, pushing Etienne before her. The child, who was in his shirt sleeves and half asleep, smiled as he rubbed his eyes. But when he beheld Lantier, he stood trembling and embarrassed, and casting anxious glances in the direction of his mother and Coupeau. "Don't you remember this gentleman?" asked the latter. The child held down his head without replying. Then he made a slight sign which meant that he did remember the gentleman. "Well then, don't stand there like a fool. Go and kiss him." Lantier gravely and quietly waited. When Etienne had made up his mind to approach him, he stooped down, presented both his cheeks, and then kissed the youngster on the forehead himself. At this, the boy ventured to look at his father, but all on a sudden he burst out sobbing and scampered away like a mad creature, with his clothes half falling off him, while Coupeau angrily called him a young savage. The emotion's too much for him, said Gervaise, pale and agitated herself. "No, he's generally very gentle and nice," exclaimed Coupeau. "I've brought him up properly, as you'll see. He'll get used to you. He must learn to know people. We can't stay mad. We should have made up a long time ago for his sake. I'd rather have my head cut off than keep a father from seeing his own son." Having thus delivered himself, he talked of finishing the bottle of brandy. All three clinked glasses again. Lantier showed no surprise, but remained perfectly calm. By way of repaying the zinc worker's politeness, he persisted in helping him put up the shutters before taking his departure. Then, rubbing his hands together to get rid of the dust on them, he wished the couple good night. "Sleep well. I shall try and catch the last bus. I promise you I'll look in again soon." After that evening, Lantier frequently called at the Rue de la Goutte d'Or. He came when the zinc worker was there, inquiring after his health the moment he passed the door, and affecting to have solely called on his account. Then, clean shaven, his hair nicely combed, and always wearing his overcoat, he would take a seat by the window and converse politely with the manners of an educated man. It was thus that the Coupeaus learned, little by little, the details of his life. During the last 8 years, he had for a while managed a hat factory, and when they asked him why he had retired from it, he merely alluded to the rascality of a partner, a fellow from his native place, a scoundrel who had squandered all the takings with women. His former position as an employer continued to affect his entire personality, like a title of nobility that he could not abandon. He was always talking of concluding a magnificent deal with some hat makers who were going to set him up in business. While waiting for this, he did nothing but stroll around all day like one of the idle rich. If anyone dared to mention a hat factory looking for workers, he smiled and said he was not interested in breaking his back working for others. A smart fellow like Lantier, according to Coupeau, knew how to take care of himself. He always looked prosperous, and it took money to look thus. He must have some deal going. One morning, Coupeau had seen him having his shoes shined on the Boulevard Montmartre. Lantier was very talkative about others, but the truth was that he told lies about himself. He would not even say where he lived, only that he was staying with a friend, and that there was no use in coming to see him because he was never in. It was now early November. Lantier would gallantly bring bunches of violets for Gervaise and the workwomen. He was now coming almost every day. He won the favor of Clémence and Madame Putois with his little attentions. At the end of the month, they adored him. The Boches, whom he flattered by going to pay his respects in their concierge's lodge, went into ecstasies over his politeness. As soon as the Lorilleuxs knew who he was, they howled at the impudence of Gervaise in bringing her former lover into her home. However, one day Lantier went to visit them, and made such a good impression, when he ordered a necklace for a lady of his acquaintance, that they invited him to sit down. He stayed an hour, and they were so charmed by his conversation that they wondered how a man of such distinction had ever lived with Clump Clump. Soon Lantier's visits to the Coupeaus were accepted as perfectly natural. He was in the good graces of everyone along the Rue de la Goutte d'Or. Goujet was the only one who remained cold. If he happened to be there when Lantier arrived, he would leave at once, as he didn't want to be obliged to be friendly to him. In the midst, however, of all this extraordinary affection for Lantier, Gervaise lived in a state of great agitation for the first few weeks. She felt that burning sensation in the pit of her stomach, which affected her on the day when Virginie first alluded to her past life. Her great fear was that she might find herself without strength if he came upon her all alone one night and took it into his head to kiss her. She thought of him too much, She was forever thinking of him. But she gradually became calmer on seeing him behave so well, never looking her in the face, never even touching her with the tips of his fingers when no one was watching. Then Virginie, who seemed to read within her, made her ashamed of all her wicked thoughts. Why did she tremble? One could not hope to come across a nicer man. She certainly had nothing to fear now. And one day the tall brunette manoeuvred in such a way as to get them both into a corner and to turn the conversation to the subject of love. Lantier, choosing his words, declared in a grave voice that his heart was dead, that for the future he wished to consecrate his life solely for his son's happiness. Every evening he would kiss Etienne on the forehead, yet he was apt to forget him in teasing back and forth with Clemence. And he never mentioned Claude, who was still in the south. Gervaise began to feel at ease. Lantier's actual presence overshadowed her memories, and seeing him all the time, she no longer dreamed about him. She even felt a certain repugnance at the thought of their former relationship. Yes, it was over. If he dared to approach her, she'd box his ears, or even better, she'd tell her husband. Once again her thoughts turned to Goujet and his affection for her. One morning Clemence reported that the previous night, at about 11 o'clock, she had seen Monsieur Lantier with a woman. She told about it maliciously and in coarse terms to see how Gervaise would react. Yes, Monsieur Lantier was on the Rue Notre-Dame de Lorette with a blonde, and she followed them. They'd gone into a shop where the worn-out and used-up woman had bought some shrimps. Then they went to the Rue de la Rochefoucauld. Monsieur Lantier had waited on the pavement in front of the house while his lady friend went in alone. Then she had beckoned to him from the window to join her. No matter how Clemence went on with the story, Gervaise went on peacefully ironing a white dress. Sometimes she smiled faintly. These southerners, she said, are all crazy about women. They have to have them no matter what, even if they come from a dung heap. When Lantier came in that evening, Gervaise was amused when Clemence teased him about the blonde. He seemed to feel flattered that he'd been seen. Mon Dieu, she was just an old friend, he explained. He saw her from time to time. She was quite stylish. He mentioned some of her former lovers, among them a count, an important merchant and the son of a lawyer. He added that a bit of playing around didn't mean a thing. His heart was dead. In the end, Clemence had to pay a price for her meanness. She certainly felt Lantier pinching her hard 2 or 3 times without seeming to do so. She was also jealous because she didn't reek of musk like that boulevard workhorse. When spring came, Lantier, who was now quite one of the family, talked of living in the neighborhood so as to be nearer his friends. He wanted a furnished room in a decent house. Madame Boche and even Gervaise herself went searching about to find it for him. They explored the neighboring streets. But he was always too difficult to please. He required a big courtyard, a room on the ground floor, in fact every luxury imaginable. And then every evening at the Coupeaus he seemed to measure the height of the ceilings, study the arrangement of the rooms, and covet a similar lodging. Oh, he would never have asked for anything better. He would willingly have made himself a hole in that warm, quiet corner. Then each time he wound up his inspection with these words: "By Jove, you are comfortably situated here." One evening when he had dined there and was making the same remark during the dessert, Coupeau, who now treated him most familiarly, suddenly exclaimed: "You must stay here, old boy, if it suits you. It's easily arranged." And he explained that the dirty clothes room, cleaned out, would make a nice apartment. Etienne could sleep in the shop on a mattress on the floor, that was all. "No, no," said Lantier, "I cannot accept. It would inconvenience you too much. I know that it's willingly offered, but we should be too warm, all jumbled up together. Besides, you know, each one likes his liberty. I should have to go through your room, and that wouldn't be exactly funny." "Ah, the rogue," resumed the zinc worker, choking with laughter, banging his fist down on the table. "He's always thinking of something smutty. But you joker will have an inventive turn of mind. There are 2 windows in the room, aren't there? Well, we'll knock one out and turn it into a door. Then, you understand, you come in by way of the courtyard, and we can even stop up the other door if we like. Thus you'll be in your home, and we in ours." A pause ensued. At length the hatter murmured, "Ah, yes, in that manner perhaps we might. And yet, no, I should be too much in your way." He avoided looking at Gervaise, but he was evidently waiting for a word from her before accepting. She was very much annoyed at her husband's idea. Not that the thought of seeing Lantier living with them wounded her feelings or made her particularly uneasy, but she was wondering where she would be able to keep the dirty clothes. Coupeau was going on about the advantages of the arrangement. Their rent, 500 francs, had always been a bit steep. Their friend could pay 20 francs a month for a nicely furnished room, and it would help them with the rent. He would be responsible for fixing up a big box under their bed that would be large enough to hold all the dirty clothes. Gervaise still hesitated. She looked towards Mother Coupeau for guidance. Lantier had won over Mother Coupeau months ago by bringing her gumdrops for her cough. End of first part of Chapter VIII. Recording by Martin Geeson in Hazelmere, Surrey.